Doing well. How are you, man?
Everything's good. Nice to
Good.
reconvene.
Yeah,
I really dug the album, so I'm looking forward to getting into it.
sounds good. Appreciate that.
So let's begin our journey. Where are you located first and foremost?
You mean at the moment?
Yeah.
I am at the McPhail Center for Music. I'm in my office here.
Okay. Very good. Okay. Well, I'm in Kansas City. I'm
Okay.
somewhere in the notes it was said, but yeah, it's great to connect on the album, and I want to begin our journey with 5 years ago. This pandemic was raging and changing everything,
hmm
particularly for musicians. How did you ultimately get through the pandemic of 2020, and how has it influenced and radiated into your world in 2025?
Wow. Um, it's an interesting question. Well, for me, musically there was two general tracks that I'm doing at any given point in time. There's my professional music life and what I'm thinking about, my performing, recording, etc. And then there's my teaching life. So teaching life, everything moved online and we tried to adjust in that way. For me, my normal schedule as a player is uh, I used to, back in the day, the New York days, I might play 5 nights a week. And these days, I might play 5 times a year.
Yeah.
Um, which is by design, it makes I pick and choose. I try to be selective. I do the things I want to do, feel lucky to be able to do that. So a lot of I didn't have an enormous amount of live performing going on. And at the same time, I do a lot of home recording. So I do a lot of tracking. I do a lot of studio work these days from my studio at home in my Spider-Man pajamas. So a lot of that work kept happening. And so I felt really lucky to be able to keep being creative, keep making music as a keyboard player, producer at home. Um, it fits with what we were kind of confronting. Um, I think the tour I did right up until the pandemic, I was doing some touring with Terrence Blanchard
Yeah.
with his E Collective, and that was kind of the last little bit of touring I was doing. Then the pandemic hit, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna hole up, do a lot of recording in the house, and stay busy that way.
So talk to me a little bit about the formation of the Zoo 2 trio. How did
hmm
this conglomeration come together, and
hmm
just I want to start there before we get into kind of the guts of the album.
hmm well, Pheeroan, akLaff, and I go way, way back. I'm thinking something like 30 years. Uh, he's an amazing musician. I've loved playing with him forever. Um, I can't tell you when and where and how we met.
Yeah.
I don't remember a time he wasn't like family to me. And so I keep thinking, when the heck did that happen? And his throne was somehow always there and we were always deeply, deeply connected. Um, and over the years, what we used to do back in New York is once a year or so, we would book studio time, just the two of us, and we'd go into a studio and record. And we might have some sketches and some ideas. We would improvise. I'd bring my keyboards and have the piano, and Jerome would bring his drum kit and various percussion, and we'd track. And for us, it was research, it was exploration. We weren't so fixed on the outcome, and sometimes that could drive up the engineer and he's like, oh, what are these guys doing? I mean, this is going on forever. This is crazy. Um, I loved it. It gave me a chance to practice recording and explore and try different things. And sometimes that worked, sometimes, it didn't. Things I thought would work did, sometimes they didn't, and all of the above. That did develop I forget what year it came out, into a project we call Brooklyn Waters, which was a little bit of a duo project we did, capturing some of those recordings. Um, so that was always a part of the work. I miss that now that I live in Minneapolis in the Twin Cities. I still go back. I still keep an apartment in Brooklyn, so I still go back frequently. But that, I started missing that and wanted to get back to that. Um, uh, and also, Pheeroan is one of my favorite composers on the planet. So as a teacher, any student I've ever had when I was teaching at New England Conservatory or Eastman or the University in Canada before here, every student over the last 30 years knows Pheeroan because I always brought his music into small groups because it's so interesting to try to think about and how to learn and kind of work with. So long time relationship with Pheeroan. Keith was a student of mine in Canada, and he got to know Pheeroan's music through playing in the ensembles. And I loved Keith's playing, and as is natural, students become peers and colleagues and friends and collaborators. And Keith started teaching in New Zealand, and I did an artist in residency there at the University of Auckland a couple years back, and got to play a lot with Keith. And we were traveling around New Zealand playing. And I started thinking about Pheeroan's music in the context of what we were doing with Keith. And I started thinking about this particular instrumentation. Uh, and so I kind of pitched it separately to both of them. They didn't know each other, but I started saying, "Hey, I think what we could create could be really, really interesting." And uh, fortunately, last summer we had an opportunity to do it.
So talk to me a little the album. How did you come up with the name? The album cover, it's just kind of sedate. There's fishing going on. It has a good vibe to it. How did all that come together?
Uh, a couple of things. The album art is taken by Keith's fiance in New Zealand, who's an incredible photographer. And New Zealand, I don't know if you've been, but it's it's a different vibration, it's its own thing. And I was very influenced by that. I loved being there. I loved the people, loved the place, loved the history of uh the indigenous folks that were there. Uh Loved the vibe and started thinking a lot about some of those sensibilities. Some of those sensibilities show up in the music, especially in Keith's writing, that are uh, I want to use the word simple in the best sense, scaled back, but give the listener a chance to kind of settle and sit and just be in the space. And it's not always kind of performative and coming at you, a little bit more experiential. Um, so the artwork is Keith's lady. Her name is Ainsley. It's Ainsley's artwork. There's New Zealand. She's from New Zealand, so there's that aesthetic that's very kind of prominent through it. In terms of the recording itself, we um, I was on the East Coast. I was doing a collaboration with the Boston Ballet last summer, where I was composed. I did composed some music for the ballet with an amazing choreographer and the musical director there, Misha Santora. So I was in Boston for many weeks, and then I had some other work in New York tagged on to that. Pheeroan happened to be around then, so I pleaded with Keith, could we get it together to bring you to New York then? It's a long trip from New Zealand. I'll be there, Pheeroan will be there. You're the only missing piece. Can we tag it on to the end of this Boston ballet work and bring it all together? And luckily, we were able to do that. So we recorded in Brooklyn last summer, and just got fortunate with the timing that it worked for all of us.
And I was wondering too, because I know Shifting Paradigm is up in Minnesota and it tends to be
Hmm.
kind of centric to that area. So it makes sense that you're up there. And what is it
Hmm.
like to be on that label? It seems like a very progressive, forward thinking kind of outfit.
Oh, I love it. Musician led. Zach Harris is a phenomenal guitarist, and how recordings are made. You know, I've recorded for a variety of labels as a sideman. I've recorded for several labels as a leader. Um, my first label as a leader was Candid, which was based in the UK at the time. That would have been 1990. I recorded for some Japanese labels. I recorded for ECM, and they all bring their own different vibe and rationale and way of approaching an aesthetic. Recording for ECM and Manfred Eicher being the producer was very specific. And the music that we did fit that label. And so I was comfortable with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, Then after that, I didn't really want to be on a label. I just wanted to make, it didn't make sense to me. I just wanted to make me the music I wanted to make. I wanted to explore and keep trying. So I did about 3 albums that I just self-released. And kind of really loved doing that. Thought that's how I was going to continue to make music.
Yeah.
But when I got centered here in the Twin Cities and got to know Zach and the community, what I loved was the regional aspect. I love the musician vibe of it, but I love the idea that this is a label that's kind of operating out of the Midwest and it keeps growing. And I felt what I did uh, aligned with the thinking of the label quite a bit. Um, and I liked the idea of kind of connecting to this particular Twin Cities and Midwest community through the label, through uh, uh, yet bringing in players that are not local here. So I thought it might be interesting for the label to have someone like Pheeroan and have a musician operating in New Zealand. And then, I'm based here. I thought what we did fit. It's something I talked to Zach about, and he loved the idea. So for me, it just felt great to be a part of it, and it has been great. I love those guys, and I also kind of just partly wanted to, by participating, I hopefully help that I'm supporting what they do as well.
So the last time we talked, we interviewed
Hmm.
was in 2023 with JC Sanford,
Right,
and he was a student, and that permeates your world being a teacher. And it's
right.
interesting because sometimes people see teaching as kind of this one-way avenue, but it's two ways. The kids
Uh-huh.
will influence you. There's so much swapping of ideologies and
Right.
methodologies. So I'm curious, at this age and place in your life, how
Hmm.
much of what you see from the kids that you teach
Hmm.
influence the way that you produce your work? And even
Hmm.
with this album, how much of this has been infused by this new blood that's in the
Hmm.
world of jazz today?
Hmm. Enormous amount, uh, I saw early on in my own teaching career that it was a two-way street. And that to be an effective teacher, I'm going to learn as much from the student as I'm going to help and influence them. If I don't have that position and that mindset, I'm probably not the most effective teacher. And it's natural because they come from a different place, a different time. They're thinking about things in a different way. And it's really surprising, it's like, wow, I never would have heard that. And they're also operating in different social groups. So they're the ones that are always turning on. Have you heard this player? No. Have you heard this? Have you heard this? Have you heard this? They're constantly turning me on to new music because they're hanging out, living it in a way that I might have migrated out of a bit. Um, but I also saw that as a student myself, the first tour I ever did in Europe, I was 20 years old, a student at Cal Arts, and it was with one of my teachers, James Newton, the great flute player. And that band had Anthony Cox, Twin Cities bass on bass, and Billy Hart on drums. And I turned 21, I think, on that tour. And we were in Europe for a month. And I was playing with my teachers, and I saw not only whether it's straight up from academia or not, there's a long, long, long tradition. You can go Tony Williams with Miles of having elder musicians playing with younger musicians. I experienced that in LA too. I was in Gerald Wilson's big band, one of the great, great big band leaders, really of all time. Just Gerald is contemporary of Duke Ellington. Gerald came up in Fletcher Henderson's band.
Yeah.
And in that band, I was young. There was a young trombone player, Luis Bonilla, phenomenal trombone player, and a young Anthony Wilson on guitar, Gerald's son. And everybody else was about 60 and older. So Snooky Young was in that band. I
Wow.
mean, so I would used to go through that band and look at their pedigree and the bands they played with, and it'd be Ellington, Ellington, Basie, 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 Ellington, Basie, Ellington, Basie, Basie, Ellington, Ellington, Basie, us kids. And I played with all of those guys in LA, George Bohan and Oscar Brashear, all of these, Teddy Edwards, these great uh, elder jazz musicians that essentially were initiating me and mentoring me and bringing me into a community. they could have found better piano players than me, but they also could see that I was serious about it. And I could see early on that that's a part of it, this exchange that happens between the young musician and the elder musician. I was with Jack DeJohnette for about 10 years, and I felt that the whole time. I became like a son to Jack. He became like a father to me. I was up at his house in Woodstock all the time, hanging out. Jack would bring me to sessions. So like Herbie Hancock's New Standard session with Dave Holland and Brecker. I was there for every minute of that
Wow.
session, just watching. I was there for Bye Bye Blackbird, Keith's trio recording with Jack and Gary. Um, Jack was bringing me into everything. We had sit up all night and listen to albums together, and he would point out, "Did you hear what just happened there?" No. Listen again. Listen to what Wayne just did right there. Oh, listen to how Miles and Wayne are doing X, Y, and Z. So I love that, this exchange. And I heard a lot of musicians used to tell me with Tony Williams joined Miles's band, he thought it was his band. And he thought that because he was a teenager.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Miles loved that, not hated that,
Right.
said, yeah, that's what a young upstart is supposed to do. And so that has informed my thinking the whole time. And I just was lucky enough to go from being the young one. I just played a gig here last Saturday night um, with my trio at a club here in the Twin Cities, and the bass player and drummer are late 20s.
Yeah.
And I'm twice their age. And I've ever since I fell in love with that process. I fell in love with it as a student, as a young person, getting to hang out and play with these elders, and then I love it now as a whatever age I am, playing with young musicians. So it's been baked in, and it's a big, 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 big part of the tradition.
So on International Jazz Day this year, the Count Basie Orchestra came to the music hall in Kansas City.
Yeah,
And when Scotty was introducing all the guys, there was like original members up there.
yeah,
But wow, that wall of sound, man. I mean, when they started
yeah,
hitting it, it was like, wow. Like that's the
yeah,
thing when you're talking about Gerald, like if no one's has seen the real power of a big band, you're
yeah,
missing out, man. And it doesn't matter
yeah,
what genre of music you dig, you have to experience that
yeah,
cacophony of like all of this discordant yet beautiful and
yeah,
unison vibe. It's
yeah.
amazing, you know?
100%. One thing that really stayed with me, I came before, I was born in LA, grew up in Vegas, went to North Texas for a few years, went to LA in the mid 80s. After that, North Texas, great big band
Yeah.
program. So 85, I'm in LA. About 87-ish, I joined Gerald's band. I thought I had some familiarity with how big bands work. And we would do little, very quick rehearsals. The band didn't need to rehearse that much. And Gerald was always adamant, I don't want to over rehearse. Don't over rehearse. First night on the stage, all of a sudden, Gerald is just moving around and turns to me, Michael, solo. Okay, so I just start soloing on a section that I never did before. Then I see the brass start playing these backgrounds that were just were spontaneous. Then whole sections we were playing the form, and then we kind of inter, and go off on a whole other place in the middle of the song. And I was like, oh my God, big band isn't this static. You learn the chart, you rehearse it, you execute it, you play it and perform it. Big band is a living, dynamic, breathing organism similar to small groups
Yeah.
when it's done by the real practitioners
Yeah.
that know that. I've never thought of the big band the same. It was a big band that we played the chart, but we could go into any direction for 23 people.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, new background parts, new solo sections, new duo solo sections, Gerald would move the chart was a starting point. The music that we were going to play in the moment took precedence over that. And that's something that I really, that was life changing. It just made me think about all those great big bands and that big band tradition um, that I I'm not sure everyone realizes just how dynamic and how fluid those traditions really used to be.
But it's like a good baseball team. You all make it look so easy, though. We have no idea, right?
Yeah,
So if we don't think like a musician, we're not getting the peccadillos and the intertwinings. We're just getting
right.
this beautiful, like watching a flock of birds kind of
Yeah,
dive around a mountain. It's like
yeah,
there's just this synchronicity. So
yeah.
how good does it feel to come from like the cauldron, the real soup of jazz in New York,
Hmm.
to come to kind of the Midwest underpinnings in the Twin Cities? How much fun has that been to be there and to perform and to be in that world?
Well, it's great, Uh, one of the great things about the Minneapolis Twin Cities has an extensive music history, obviously with Prince
Yeah.
and Morris Day and the Time and Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis and Sheila E. And you can go on and on with that. Sounds of Blackness, that great tradition that really is uh, a kind of R&B soul tradition that flows out of having a strong gospel tradition, you know. And that's something you recognize right away. So there is a Minneapolis sound,
Yeah.
and you go hear that funk, and those folks are like, wow, that is popping. That is really, really special. I love being around that. And you asked where I'm at the moment. I'm at the McPhail Center for Music here. My teaching job now has morphed into kind of organically my brand new role here as vice president of music education. And McPhail is the largest community music school in the United States. So we run our cohort of students runs from 6 months to our oldest student currently is about 104.
Wow.
Toddlers, early childhood, all the way to 104. We have music therapy, we have Suzuki, we have jazz bands, rock bands. We have about 15,000 students that come from through our doors every year. And so it's a community music school, meaning music in community.
Yeah.
So that's the other vantage point. I operate here in the professional music community and by performing and playing. And now by being in McPhail at a community music school, I'm thinking about how do we support music within the Twin Cities? How are we a resource? We're a school, that's one way, but um, how do we how to really serve music over the lifespan for people. So my work kind of flows between those two worlds here within the Twin City landscape, and I love it. I love being here. I love that I get lucky enough to be able to go back to New York frequently
Yeah.
and still be a part of that because I was there 30 plus years. So I'm still deeply connected to those musicians. That feels really great. I still go work with folks out in most of the studio work I do is out of Vegas.
Yeah.
And as people sent from studios there because that's my hometown. So I still great music scene, phenomenal musicians that are there.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of pop and rock sessions, I'm playing organ on R&B tracks and things like that. Uh, so I live here. This is my home base, but I'm also still connected to these other places
Totally.
that I have roots.
Yeah. It is amazing how the cities, like the Twin Cities, will incubate that sound that was created, like
Yeah,
in Kansas City, that blues
yeah,
sound of Jay
yeah,
McShannon, Bird,
yeah,
it,
yeah,
it it will always be a part of the
yeah,
lineage. And even Bobby Watson coming back
yeah,
and teaching that
yeah,
legion of young cats, like it still is permeated. There's always this reverence for history, but it
yeah,
always kind of splays out into tributaries into different
yeah.
directions, right? That's the beauty.
Totally. It's something that I so love about how the music, one of the first things when I started touring and being around musicians, like when I did that tour in 88 with James Newton, first time in Europe, we did a ton of festivals. And being with Billy Hart, who knows everybody, he
Yeah.
was like, come meet, Les McCann, come meet so and so, come meet, Bobby Watson, come meet, I just over and over all these different people. And the first question that all of them asked me, where are you from? Because it tells you something. So
Uh-huh.
if you're from Kansas City, it's like, okay,
Yep.
I know something that's in your DNA. If you're from Memphis, got it. I know something that's in
Uh-huh.
your DNA. If you're from DC, okay, and I still do the same because it tells, are you all from Texas? Okay, we're in Texas. Are you North Texas? Okay, got it.
Yep. Yeah.
You don't pinch it. It's not pigeonholing, but it's that appreciating that regional aspect of how music has those centers like that.
Yep.
and 100% with the Kansas City. I think for me, I also think as a pianist about uh, all the pianists, all that, the boogie woogie and the stride and all that history.
Well, even Mary Lou coming from Pittsburgh and growing up in
Right,
Casey, I mean, the
right.
lore of Count, just that whole
Yeah,
vibe. It's wonderful.
yeah.
It's always great to catch up with you, man. So Zoo 2
Likewise.
Trio, Poetry Legroom, Shifting Paradigm's wonderful. I love working with them, and there's so much great. It's like shifting is getting up there, and I'm not trying to like blanket statement and say anything
Hmm.
specifically, but like anytime I get shifting or Cellar Live, I know I'm gonna run out to my car and put it in the CD chamber.
Yeah, I hear you totally,
Just
totally.
good music. So,
Yeah.
if anyone wants to get the album, catch up with what you're doing with live or any of your previous work, where's the best place for them to go?
Probably my website at these days, michaelcain.com.
Okay,
I do my best to keep it updated.
right on. That's it. It's all we can do. Man, I look
Yeah.
forward to the next time we meet up. Thank you, sir. It's great.
Likewise, Joe.
Best of luck with
Appreciate it,
everything.
man. Thanks so
Thank you.
much.
Yes, sir. Take care, man.